Hi everyone, my name is Kate Trout, and for my project I wrote an essay comparing early modern humans and Neanderthals, and basically exploring the question of why we survived while they went extinct. And originally I wanted to write a 10-minute stage play about this topic, but I quickly realized that was going to be very difficult, so I went with the traditional essay format instead, and I think that worked a lot better and allowed me to accomplish what I wanted to do. So to present the information for my essay, I made this slideshow. So, who were the Neanderthals? And I know it can be pronounced Neanderthal or Neanderthal, but I believe technically Neanderthal is the correct pronunciation, so I'm going with that. The Neanderthals, or Homo neanderthalensis, their scientific name, were an ancient hominid group that lived many thousands of years ago across a vast area of Eurasia. And they likely first emerged a few 100,000 years ago towards the end of the Pleistocene, possibly even before anatomically modern humans appeared. So technically, they may have been even older than we were. And they went extinct around 40,000 years ago. And their remains were first discovered in the mid-19th century in Germany, although researchers did not know what they were right away. And I believe some people theorize that they may have been the remains of modern humans with physical deformities, but obviously that has been disproven and they are now recognized as Neanderthals. But once they were recognized as such, it sparked an intense debate over whether or not they should be classified as a subspecies of Homo sapiens or as their own distinct species, which is a debate that is still going on today. So there are some physiological differences between Neanderthals and us, which makes them stand out quite a bit. They had long, low skulls, kind of more football-shaped, and large brow ridges, larger than ours. And our skulls were also a bit smaller and rounder than theirs. And they were also very stocky and muscular. They were well suited for the colder environments of the steppes of Eurasia. They had a wider pelvis, shorter limbs, and larger noses. And their large noses were actually, I didn't mention this on the slides, but their noses were also an adaptation for the cold. They had a wider nasal cavity that allowed them to inhale cold air and make it warmer, like more effectively than we could. And it's actually, despite their reputation as being unintelligent, it's actually been found that they had larger brains than we did, or at least a larger cranial capacity, which is very interesting. Like researchers have, I'm sorry, I'm stuttering a lot. Researchers have found that they were actually like much smarter than we previously gave them credit for. Uh, and then despite the differences, we also shared a lot of physiological similarities with them. Researchers now found that they walked upright just like we did. They had a curved S-shaped spine, though their spine shape might have been a little different. They had hands with opposable thumbs that allowed them to make tools, start fires, and they had the same non-divergent hallux that we do, the big toe. Just like us, their big toe is straight, which allows them to walk bipedally, or allowed them to walk bipedally. And on the right there, I have a picture of a reconstruction of a Neanderthal man and an early modern human side by side. So you can kind of see some of the differences in skull shape, nose size, and those things. So continuing on with the classification debate, evidence indicates that we shared a common ancestor with them. So we're definitely very evolutionary similar, but whether or not they should be classified as their own species has been a subject of debate for a long time. And it's complicated because it's not just about physiology, but it's also about genetics and other factors. And when evidence first came to light that early modern humans and Neanderthals interbred, it brought a whole new dimension to the debate because it kind of challenged what a lot of researchers thought about what it meant to be a distinct species. Like there's the biological species concept, which is the idea that distinct species must be reproductively isolated and cannot interbreed with each other. But this concept has been challenged time and time and again, as it has been observed that in the wild and in captivity, there have been examples of different species interbreeding with each other. And of course now we have this evidence of early modern humans and Neanderthals interbreeding. So we can't always rely on the biological species concept to determine whether or not two groups are distinct species. And there is really not a clear-cut answer yet, as there's arguments to support both sides. And again, the way we define species will continue to change over time. And I think some researchers do consider Neanderthals to be a type of archaic human, and a lot of the articles I came across describe them as that. So it also depends on how you define human and a lot of other things, but that is a debate that is still ongoing. So how did Neanderthals live? So as I said before, they lived across a very wide area of western and central Eurasia, mostly in small hunter-gatherer groups. Evidence indicates that they were highly social, just like us. They cared for the sick and injured, and they buried their dead. Uh, and we have now discovered that they likely had the ability to speak. Their range of speech would have been more limited than ours because their larynx was likely higher, and they also had a flatter skull base than ours. Because we have a low set larynx that allows us to produce like a wide variety of sounds and complex speech, and theirs would not have been as low as ours. Uh, but we know that they likely did speak to some extent because a lot of their practices, their material culture, likely could not have existed if they weren't able to speak and share knowledge with each other, teach their children. They were also skilled hunters, and they ate a lot of meat. They worked in groups to hunt big game like mammoths, and they especially would have relied on meat during cold spells when there was not as much plant material available, not as many vegetables available. And they were also excellent tool makers, and they are now believed to have perfected what is known as the levalloy technique, which involves striking flakes off of an oblong stone core to use as tools. Uh, so obviously, despite the fact that they were thought of as stupid and unintelligent for a long time, they were actually very smart, probably as smart as we were, and they were highly social, and they cared for each other. So they were a lot more like us than we previously thought. So the big question I wanted to address is why did they go extinct? And there are several different theories about that. One of them is a possible loss of genetic diversity due to inbreeding. So this theory kind of ties into the migration of early modern humans into Eurasia. So as they pushed further into Eurasia and eventually came to dominate the continent, some researchers theorized that Neanderthal populations may have splintered into like small isolated groups, which would have led to a lot of inbreeding and the creation of a genetic bottleneck effect in which much of the original gene pool was lost and their genes became much more limited. And this may have been compounded by, as well as interbreeding with early modern humans. And it's possible that a lot of the Neanderthal gene pool may have been kind of absorbed into the human population as interbreeding occurred. And, any Neanderthals that were left would have had a much smaller gene pool, and this may eventually lead them to die out. And another theory is that their extinction may have been caused by climate change and the subsequent loss of resources caused by that. Some researchers theorize that changes in the climate over time may have caused some of the flora and fauna that the Neanderthals depended on for food to begin to die out, especially many Ice Age megafauna that were heading towards extinction at the end of the Pleistocene. Neanderthals likely did hunt a lot of these for food, and as those began to die out, they would not have had as much access to those. And the resource competition that they faced from the ever-growing population of early modern humans would not have helped, especially as the early modern humans, their populations kept growing, and they would have become harder to compete against, especially if Neanderthals were already struggling and splintering into smaller groups. And then finally, another kind of branch of that theory is that they may have had difficulty adapting as climate change changed their environments, began drastically reducing the resources available to them. It may have just been very difficult for them to adapt to these changes, especially because they were very well adapted to the colder environments of Eurasia. And if they were specialized for that kind of environment, it may have been very difficult for them as the climate began to change. Okay, and then the other side of this question, why did we survive and why didn't we go extinct? So again, there are multiple theories for this as well, but we know that early modern humans were extremely adaptable, and obviously today we have proven our ability to survive almost anywhere on the planet in almost any climate. One thing that researchers theorize about is that dietary plasticity may have helped us a lot. We ate a wide variety of foods, including raw and eventually cooked vegetables and other plants such as tubers. And as I mentioned before, Neanderthals did eat some plants and vegetables, but not as frequently, as it likely was not available to them as often, and they depended more on meat. And early modern humans likely also had greater genetic diversity than Neanderthals, especially towards the end, as Neanderthals were likely inbreeding more and losing a lot of their previous genetic diversity. And also, we do think that Neanderthal DNA did contribute to the human genome via interbreeding, and we know today that a lot of people do have some percentage of Neanderthal DNA. And so that would have actually increased human genetic diversity while kind of taking some away from Neanderthals, unfortunately. And also, some researchers believe that early modern humans had some specific innovations in technology that Neanderthals did not. Neanderthals were very smart and they excelled at tool making, but there were some things early modern humans had that they didn't, such as sewing needles for making more durable clothing, bows and arrows for hunting at a distance. Like when it came to Neanderthals, their hunting strategy often involved, like, they worked in groups, but their hunting strategy often involved, hunting at a close distance and like using spears to directly attack prey. But bows and arrows were a very effective hunting tool because you could hunt large prey without getting hurt. And so, all in all, the most likely answer is that the true cause of Neanderthal extinction was a combination of multiple different factors, including loss of genetic diversity, climate change, competition for resources. It's most likely that all of these things kind of combined to cause the downfall of the Neanderthals. I'm so sorry, I keep saying Neanderthals. And despite their intelligence and impressive survival skills, it would seem that ultimately Neanderthals were not quite as well equipped to take on the challenges of global migration and climate change as early modern humans were. And like I said, although they are physically extinct, a portion of their DNA lives on in many of us. Studies indicate that many people today have around 2% Neanderthal DNA within their genome, though the exact amount varies between populations. And I've seen a lot of studies on this. There may be evidence that Neanderthal DNA contributed to our health and our immune system. Their DNA may have helped early modern humans fight diseases, which again may have contributed to our survival. And there's still a lot we don't know about them, but there's a growing body of evidence to give us insight into their lives and how their existence relates to our own. And as we have seen, they really were very, very similar to us, much more similar than we thought previously. And I do think it's very important to understand them in order to better understand ourselves. And that was my project. I really enjoyed doing this. I learned a lot more about Neanderthals than I knew previously. And I would love to research them more in the future if I ever get the opportunity. Thank you.